Hey everybody, welcome to the Conscious Love Show. Whether you are single, you are in a relationship, or you're healing a broken heart, this show is here to inspire you, to remind you how beautiful, lovable, and amazing you truly are, and to give you the practical tools and insights to navigate from wherever you are right now to the loving relationship that you so deeply want to have. My name is Shane Kohler. I'm a certified transformational coach and trainer with over a decade experience helping people release their trauma and open their hearts to love. I've delivered seminars all over the world, coached thousands of people through my online platforms and programs, and every week I'm coming straight to you with the hottest insights and the best teachers around, bringing you powerful resources and profound conversations to heal your relationship with love, dating, and yourself. I'm so grateful you're here, and if it's your first time, welcome. You can count on me to always show up for you with my very best and a commitment to learn and grow myself so I can serve you to my maximum ability. Thanks so much for tuning into the show. I've got some awesome things planned for you today. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, what's up, everybody? Hello again, and welcome back to the Conscious Love Show podcast. Shane Kohler on with you today. Pleasure as always. Grateful to be back and happy to be diving in with you today. Today's episode, I'm talking about the 7 feminine power codes that men cannot resist. And I'm excited to dive into this episode. I've been recently reflecting on a lot of the information and content that is out there. And as a man who is on the other side of relating with women, I see how much of the information is actually disempowering and devaluing women in a man's eyes. And I see this coming from both women and men, actually. So there are men putting out certain messages that are super disempowering to women. And there are also women putting out messages that are super disempowering to women. And maybe it's because a lot of this content is very controversial and it goes viral and people will say anything to get attention. So maybe that's what's behind it. Like, I don't really know why so much of this information is out there, but in today's episode, I hope to correct some of that misinformation and break down the 7 laws and the 7 principles that truly empower women in their relationships with men and also make them irresistible to the highest caliber of man. A lot of the things that are out in the common discourse right now, and I'll just name a couple. Like one, for example, is I see a lot of posts and people talking about it where they say that, you should never settle for a coffee date. If he wants to invite you for coffee, that's low value behavior. And I'm like, I've actually coached my clients to require coffee on a first date. It's like he tries to take you to dinner. It's like, no, let's meet for a coffee first. And the reason for that is because you're setting the pace, you're setting the standard. And that's one of these principles that I'm going to talk about today. But it's like from the beginning, you're saying, no, I'm not going to be bought with a fancy dinner. I'm not going to dedicate to spending a whole evening with you before I've even met you. Like, you can take me out to coffee. I can gauge if there's good rapport there. And if so, then you can take me to dinner. Right. And this whole supposed high value thing where I don't show up for any less than an expensive dinner, that's not high value. That's telling someone that you can be bought. That's not you setting the standard. That's letting someone else set the standard. So that's just a really quick example that comes to mind. And there's a lot of women teaching this, and it's disempowering to women. Another thing I've noticed is this whole trad wife movement, traditional wife movement, that there are a lot of women preaching on social media now. And what I find really ironic about this is there are women building whole brands around being a traditional wife. And a traditional wife means that you don't work, you don't earn your own money, you don't have your own agency, you don't have your own sovereignty, you are a homemaker and basically dependent on your husband. And what's really ironic about these women who have these trad wife brands is they're actually creating creating a brand and creating a business around being a trad wife. So basically, they are empowering themselves financially, with an audience, with personal agency, while convincing other women to do the exact opposite. Like, isn't that fucking manipulative as hell? Like, I'm gonna prop myself up as someone showing women how to live, and I'm going to covertly build a business and build an audience and build personal agency while convincing other women to give up their business and their audience and their agency. I mean, that's fucked up if you ask me. I see it from men. There's a big narrative out there. I've seen a lot of these videos recently where men are saying, if you want a man in your life, you shouldn't have a business. You should make the relationship your top priority. You shouldn't be a boss babe or be working or be going out with girls' nights and having your own life. Like, the relationship needs to be the center of your world. And I hear these guys saying this shit and I'm like, you sound like such a little bitch right now. Like, are you really that insecure that if a woman has any personal agency or friendships or a life outside of you, that your little fragile ego just can't handle it? Like, it's the most pathetic thing that I've ever heard from men. And these men are boosting themselves up like they're the ultimate alpha males. I'm like, you're not an alpha anything. You're a scared little boy who needs a woman's dependence in order to feel secure. And I'm just naming a few of the obvious things that come to mind, but these are some of the pervasive messages that I see time and time again in the culture right now that are masquerading as empowerment, but are really truly disempowering. And when you listen to this advice, I'm speaking to the ladies, when you listen to this advice, what ends up happening is you end up turning off really powerful, secure, conscious men and attracting weak men, attracting men who need your dependence, who need your disempowerment, who think that you can be bought with a fancy dinner or a fancy date. And you transition from setting your own standards and leading the pace of the relationship to following someone else's pace. And I think it's so important because women are truly vulnerable in relationship. Like, women are much more susceptible to things like narcissistic abuse. Women are much more susceptible to the power dynamics between a man and a woman. Like, that can get unbalanced very easily. And so it's so important that a woman operates in relationship with men from the laws of power. And what's going to happen when she operates from these 7 laws that I'm going to cover today is she really speaks her value to a man. And yes, these little weak, fake alpha males on social media that need you to be the center of your world, you're going to repel these guys. And if you're trying to attract them, then it's not going to work. And I don't know why any woman would want an insecure little man like that anyway. But if you're trying to attract a secure man, a whole man, someone who wants to meet you as a partner, not as a possession, these 7 laws that I'm going to talk about today are the 7 laws that call forth that kind of man. So I'm looking forward to diving into today's episode. And something I want to say before we get into it is that what I'm going to do in today's episode is I'm going to set a kind of standard. And some of what I say today, you may feel the discontinuity between where you currently operate from and the standard that I'm going to set. And that's normal because our nervous systems are conditioned by our past relationships, right? And so when I say these things, I'm not saying that you should be all of this 100% of the time automatically. I'm saying that these are the standards that we want to grow into to be the most whole, empowered, secure versions of ourselves, right? Like, these are the standards that we want to step into. And I understand that, especially if you've had a traumatic childhood, a traumatic relational history, if love has always felt insecure for you, then these standards are going to be a stretch. Maybe some more than others. Maybe in certain areas you'll feel like they stretch you more than others. And that's normal, right? If this wasn't normal, I wouldn't even be having this conversation. Everybody would already be doing it, right? So I want to presence early on that that's normal. And I also want to make the invitation early on in today's episode. So I've recently opened up space for people who want to begin working with me in 2026. And I only have a few spaces available. My program fills up very quickly whenever I open up space, but I want to make the invitation to the podcast listeners first, that if you've been listening, if you resonate with my work, if you know there's something here that you're ready to step into in the new year, if you're ready for a profound shift in the way you experience yourself, your relationships with men in the new year, then I want to invite you to take that step and to work with me. And I'm going to leave the link to get started in the show notes. You tap that link, you can learn all about the program. If you're interested, you just submit your email, and we'll send you all the details to get started for the 2026 group. But my Inspired Love program is the place where I work hands-on with you to heal the nervous system patterns that keep you stuck in the old ways of relating. And the standards that I'm going to present today, the 7 laws that I'm going to cover, these are the things that women consistently step into through our work together. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to paint the end result picture. And then if you identify the gap and you say there are certain things of these that I want to step into that I know I really struggle with, well, that's what the work is for. That's what the program is for, right? It's the place where we can work closely together so that you can heal the nervous system impressions that keep you repeating old cycles that feel very uncomfortable for you. And you can start to show up with these new standards. And when you do, you call forth a completely different type of man. But more importantly than anything external is you feel more whole within yourself. And that's the most important point. This isn't really about getting anything outside of yourself, but it's about being something within yourself. And as you step into that being and as you consistently embody a different state of being, the relationships around you tend to reflect that. The types of men and people you attract start to reflect that. So I'm going to leave that link in the show notes right below wherever you're listening to this. You can also just go to inspiredloveapproach.com and you can start there. But I want to get into today the 7 laws of empowered relating. And the first one is the law of sovereignty. And maybe this is the most important. This is the parent of all of the others. So sovereignty is wholeness. Sovereignty is the ability to stand on your own 2 feet. This is the exact opposite of, the guys who say, if you want a relationship, you need to not have nights out with your friends, not have a business or make money of your own, that you need a relationship to be the center of your life, right? Sovereignty is the exact opposite. And actually, one of the things that gave me the idea for today's episode is a conversation that my nanny or our nanny had with my wife yesterday. And she was saying something to the effect, I wasn't there, my wife just told me about it afterwards, but she had said something to the effect of, she's working really hard. This is an amazing young lady, our nanny. But she started her own business on the side, and she hustles all the time. She's building her own business, and then she nannies during the week, and she's just, she's a really amazing young lady. But she was talking about, how hard it all is and how exhausting it is. And she said something to the effect of I wish I could just find a man who could handle these things for me, and then I could just, do what I want with my time. And my wife said to her, she's like, honey, you don't want that. And my wife had this very conversation with her. She's like, you don't want to be dependent on a man. Whatever level of relationship you enter with, you enter into a man is you want to be operating from a sense of agency and a sense of choice. You don't ever want to be dependent on anyone. If you get into a relational situation and you need to leave and you're dependent on that person, that's going to make it impossible for you to leave. Right. And so there's a sense of personal sovereignty where I make the choices in my life. Whatever relationship I get into that relationship from choice, not from need. And my wife said, I know it's hard, but it's important because this is how you keep yourself safe. And I want to make a caveat here because, let's take myself and my wife, for example. Now, my wife was running her own business a decade before I even met her. So, for me to come into her life and be like, well, I'm the man now, I've got things handled, you should just give up your business. That would be insane. How, if I had wanted her to abandon something that she had spent over a decade building, That would be crazy, right? Like why on earth would she do that? But let's say that maybe down the road, maybe she gets to a place where she's ready to step back from it. Maybe, our daughter's growing up. She wants to be able to be more present with our daughter. And maybe this will happen, maybe it won't, right? But after being together for many years, after building a life, a marriage, a family, if we were to at some point make an agreement where, hey, you can step back from your work, you can focus on the home and our daughter, and if that's something that she wanted to do, and I was able to facilitate that for her, that could be a beautiful thing. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with being a traditional wife necessarily, but you don't start with that. You start with sovereignty. You start with personal agency. When you enter into a relationship with someone that you trust, and you've built a foundation with them, and they're not a narcissist, and they're not going to wield inappropriate power over you, and that they're not going to trap you in a situation that you don't want to be in, and there's safety and there's like a relational history there that you can count on. And if you want to make some kind of agreement where, maybe one of the partners does stop working so they can take care of the home, take care of the family, take care of the children, and be fully present like that, that's not wrong. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm saying we don't start relationships that way. That's something we can grow into together. And one of the greatest things about partnership is that it offers that flexibility where that's an option for some people. But we don't go into a relationship starting with dependence. We start with independence. We start with sovereignty. You want to be somebody who can stand whole within yourself. And your worth, your emotional stability, your sense of identity don't hinge on a man's attention or behavior. Your financial stability does not depend on him. Your freedom, your agency does not depend on him. And whatever level of a relationship you enter into, you choose that relationship. You don't need it. Sovereignty is what makes your presence magnetizing instead of needy. And there are a lot of men out there who want a needy woman because her neediness justifies his insecure ego. And what I'm coaching all of you on right now is don't be that needy woman who's going to become a man's ego trophy. That's never going to go well for you. You enter into a relationship as an equal partner, someone who is whole and sovereign in her own right, someone who can stand on her own, but chooses the relationship because it adds something to her life. And I want to say this, for a truly masculine man, for a truly stable, secure man, he is not threatened by this. He's deeply, deeply attracted to it. You see, what an insecure man says is I need a woman who can't stand on her own, who needs me to feel worthy, for emotional stability, to give her life meaning and belonging in the world, who doesn't have a business or money or agency or friendships or a life outside of me. I need a woman like that to make me feel like I'm enough, because the only way I can feel like a man is if she makes me feel like one based on how much she needs me. But what a truly secure, healthy man sees is that she doesn't need me, but she chooses me. A little bit later in the episode, we're going to talk about the laws of polarity a little bit and the laws of masculine and feminine. And a lot of the content out there, this is another big misunderstanding in terms of how people talk about polarity on social media. But they say masculine man, feminine woman, and a masculine man needs a feminine woman. And there's some truth to that, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit later in the episode. But something I want to say right now is that it's not about masculine man, feminine woman. It's about two whole beings. A man who is masculine in nature, but also in touch with his feminine. A woman who is feminine in nature, but also in touch with her masculine. Two whole integrated beings partnering together. And I'm going to say this as a strong, secure man, the most attractive thing is not a woman who's so feminine and soft that she's basically a puddle on the floor. But it's a woman who, yes, is feminine and soft, but is also in touch with her own strength, is also in touch with that masculine energy inside of herself. And then she chooses to lay that down in relationship and soften into her feminine, not because she has to, but because she chooses to. Like, I really want you to get this. It's the sexiest thing in the world is when a woman who has access to her own masculine chooses to soften into her feminine and give herself over to her man. Again, not because she needs to, but because she chooses to. A truly strong, secure man wants to experience that. Not a woman who needs me by default, but a woman who doesn't need me and still offers herself to me. I'll circle back to that a little later on. But law number 1, the law of sovereignty, a woman who stands whole within herself, a woman who is engaging in every aspect of the relationship by choice, not by necessity. Number 2, the law of boundaried openness. And this is something that, again, if you listen to a lot of the advice on social media, you're going to get really, really confused about this, because what you hear is people talking about boundaries and what you hear is people talking about openness, but nobody really talks about boundaried openness. And so what they say is you need to be soft, you need to be feminine, you need to be open, and you need to be available. And, that's all wonderful until you need to protect yourself. And then there's the opposite side of the coin where they talk about boundaries. You don't let a man do this, and you don't let a man do that, and you say this, and you do that. And it's very harsh, and it's very masculine in nature. And that actually does repel men, right? Like, no man wants to engage with that. And so when people say, like, a woman needs to be feminine and a man needs to be masculine, there's truth to the polarity of it, because feminine and masculine are attracted to each other like magnets, right? And so in context of this law, the law of boundaried openness, boundaries are masculine, openness is feminine, right? The masculine is the strength, the structure, the provider. The feminine is the soft, the receptive, the open. And this is a merge of the two. So the law of boundaried openness says that I am open, I am available. And something I often tell my clients is you remain open until you need to assert a boundary. So this woman is soft, warm, accessible, but she never loses her spine. She doesn't overextend to gain approval. She doesn't shut down to protect herself. Her openness invites connection, and her boundaries define how that connection is allowed to occur. So you can think about it like this. Openness attracts men, and boundaries educate them. And so there's this beautiful dance of being open, being soft, being warm, being receptive, being available. And then in that space of openness where you're inviting the connection, you're allowing him to step in. Something occurs. It maybe feels a little off in your system. You feel like this isn't quite safe for me. This feels maybe like a violation in some way, something I'm not okay with. And in an instant, it's like, whoa, hold on. We need to talk about this. And it doesn't mean that it's harsh or critical, but it is a little bit strong. It is a little bit assertive. What she's doing is she's saying, this is not an anything goes environment. And yes, I will be soft. I will be open. I will be receptive. I will be this warm, feminine presence, and I will let you be that masculine presence, and you will feel like a man in relationship with me. But that softness is not something you're entitled to. It's something that is earned through the safety that you create in this relationship. Right? Your softness, your receptivity is not something that he's entitled to. It's something that he earns. This is so important. And as I said earlier, a lot of people will talk about being soft, being receptive, being feminine. A lot of people will talk about having boundaries and telling him what you need. And a lot of people will talk about both sides of the coin, but very rarely do you hear someone talk about being able to dynamically move between the two. Very rarely do you hear someone talk about being receptive and open and available, but being willing to step in any time that softness is not being earned. And I think it's important to say that even the perfect man is not always going to earn your softness perfectly. Every man needs to be educated in how to love you. Because he's never been in a relationship with you before. So he needs to be educated. And the way he gets educated, it's not by sitting down and criticizing him. Like, one of the biggest ways to shut a man down or to push him away is to criticize him. It's not about telling him what he's doing wrong. It's not about making him feel small or making him feel inadequate. It's not about anything like that. It's about the boundaries. It's about the moment where your permissiveness stops. And now he's going, wait, there's an energy from her that I want to feel, and I'm not feeling that energy right now. What do I do to get back to that energy? What do I do to create that? And this is where you educate him through your boundaries on what you need to feel safe. This is a living, breathing dynamic that's alive inside of the relationship. It's not like you're sitting down and giving him a lecture like, okay, here are the 5 points that I need for safety, and I'm going to educate you on them one by one. No, this is a living, breathing interaction that's happening within your relationship with each other. The moment your permissiveness stops, the moment he feels a boundary being put in place, the moment you say, hold on, we need to talk about this. Something you said didn't sit right with me. What did you mean by that? You know, when I'm with you, I really want to feel like this. And these are the things you can do that make me feel that way. And the moment you start to have these boundaries and you start to call him forward into the standards that create the safety that allow your openness to feel natural, that's how you teach him how to love you. And again, a weaker man may be intimidated by that, but a strong man is going to respect the hell out of it. A strong man is going to say, this is a woman I can trust because I know that she doesn't betray herself. And if she doesn't betray herself, she's not going to betray me either. That's the kind of woman that he will devote his life to. Number 3, the law of intentional invitation. And this is maybe the openness part of the boundaried openness. So the feminine doesn't chase, but she also doesn't sit back and hide. She signals availability through presence, through eye contact, through playfulness, through warmth, through micro invitations that tell masculine energy you may approach. I did a whole episode on this recently. It was called Men Won't Approach You in 2026. So if you want more detail onto this specific topic, go listen to that episode. But the law of intentional invitation, it's the way that you signal availability. A lot of women sit back and say, if he was man enough, he would come approach me while signaling closed off energy. No man's going to approach closed off energy. A woman who is grounded in herself, she's not going to chase a man, but she's going to let him know, I'm open to connection if you want to take that step. And just in the interest of time and me wanting to cover all of these, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail on this because I just did a whole episode on it. But if you're interested in really the detailed, nuanced dynamics of how this works, I'd say go listen to that episode. The idea is to have a presence that speaks availability, to have an openness, a way that you make eye contact, a way that you carry your body, a way that you smile, a way that you joke, a way that you're playful, a way that you're friendly and warm, and that you can speak to someone in a way that says, hey, it's safe to connect with me. She invites connection without ever chasing. And this is, a lot of times when I talk to women about this, they collapse the two. When I talk about inviting connection, they say, well, I thought I wasn't supposed to chase. Inviting is not chasing. Chasing is once the invitation has been made and the man doesn't act on it. And then you start going, why didn't you act on it? What do I have to do to get you to act on it? Here's another opportunity and another opportunity and another opportunity. And what I often say to women is it's not even about inviting one man one time in one specific situation. It's about having invitation be part of your natural presence, right? So you're like a walking invitation for connection. Everywhere you go, there's a presence that you carry that is warm, soft, open, available, and inviting. And when men experience that, they feel safe interacting with you. But that's distinct, or what I want to say is that openness, that warmth, that invitation is always balanced by the fact that at any moment you can step in with a boundary. And this is something that I want to name here because a lot of women don't feel safe being a walking invitation because they've been hurt by men. And this is literally this is the water I swim in my work with women every single week. And I get that. And I have a lot of compassion. And I don't want you to hear me saying in any way that I don't honor and respect the pain that men have caused and the way that you've learned to protect yourself against that. Because I absolutely do. I have the deepest respect for that. But what I want to say is, as long as you're living in a chronic trauma response, as long as your nervous system is in a state of constant protection that doesn't allow you to be a walking invitation for connection in the world, you're never going to attract the quality of connection that you're looking for. In fact, the irony is that trauma tends to call out to the vibrational equivalent of that trauma, which is more kind of toxicity. A lot of women say, why do I always attract toxic men? And sometimes the reason is because that's the vibration that you carry. And so it's not that I'm dishonoring the fact that you've been hurt or that you need to protect yourself, but what I want to work with you on is undoing the chronic trauma response that your nervous system carries. Because when you recognize as a sovereign individual that you have the ability to create a boundary whenever necessary, that you have the ability to protect yourself whenever necessary, that actually allows the freedom to be a walking invitation for connection. And the moment that connection crosses a line, it's like, whoa, hold on, let's stop right there. That doesn't sit right with me. We're going to need to correct this or address this before we move forward. And this becomes the very way that you kind of test a man's true nature. It's very interesting that his true nature is not revealed in your softness, it's revealed in your boundary. The softness, the invitation, that invites the connection. The boundary shows if he has the capacity to truly hold you the way that you need to be held. Number 4, the law of feminine pace. A woman in her power chooses the relationship. She is not fighting to be chosen. And this is why I've often spoken about this, that the greatest feminine wound is the need to be chosen, because it's a complete distortion of everything that is her true power. And this is something that women as a whole have been conditioned into in the world, in the masculine dominated world that we live in. Women have been brought up to be pleasers, to be accommodating, to always seek to meet the needs of the men around them. And this starts at a very, very young age, starts in childhood for most women. There's a chronic thing that gets wired into the female nervous system that says, choose me. If I'm good enough, you'll choose me. Show me that I'm good enough. Want me, desire me. And most women, until they've done some serious work around this, tend to, by default, operate in this need to be chosen. But the feminine in her power, she's actually the chooser. And so the way it works is she's opening the invitation. As I spoke about earlier, she's this walking invitation. Her very presence invites connection. Men are stepping into the invitation that she creates. And then she is choosing from these men. She's choosing. So she is setting the tempo of emotional and physical intimacy. I've often talked about this, and this is something a lot of women get triggered by when I talk about how, like, you want to pace how quickly the physical intimacy in the relationship develops. And a lot of women say, like, who are you to police my sexuality? And first of all, I'm not policing anybody's sexuality. Do whatever you want. I don't care. But I'm talking about what works in relationship with men. And who am I to talk about this? I'm a man who's been on the receiving end of it. I'm a man who knows how this affects men. And I need to be really clear. Physical intimacy, sex, does not affect women the same way it affects men. Two completely different worlds. I understand wanting to feel like you can do what you want when you want to and not have anyone, especially a man, telling you what you should and shouldn't do. But we need to balance that with the reality that actions have consequences. And let me put it this way. Women are the gatekeepers of sex. When a man meets a woman, he's trying to have sex with her. Almost 100% of the time. And anyone who says that's not true, one, has no idea how fucking nature works, because billions of years of evolution have made this so. Right? Like, this is not a theory. This is what's literally been wired into the way human beings operate since the beginning of time. And one of the greatest powers a woman has in relationship with a man is to pace the rate at which the physical relationship develops, so that his physical desire is not satisfied before his protective instinct kicks in. And I'll put it like this. And again, I've done whole episodes on this, so I don't want to go into too much detail here, but I just want to give you some context for what I'm talking about. The more a man invests in a woman, the more he starts to feel protective of that woman. Men don't fall in love the way women do. Women have a very emotional experience of love and connection, and especially once sex gets involved, it heightens the emotional attachment. There's science behind this where we talk about oxytocin and all the hormones involved. And without getting into too much of that side of it, the experience is very different. A man commits often through protection, through his protective instinct that develops around a woman. There's a completely different hormone that drives that. It's called vasopressin. Where women tend to connect through oxytocin, that's the bonding hormone. It's the same hormone that has women bond to children. Men experience oxytocin as well, but that generally comes much later. In fact, the male sex hormone testosterone blocks the production of oxytocin in men. So that means when a man is trying to have sex with you and his sex drive, his sex hormone, testosterone, is really high, he's actually not producing the hormone that would have him bond to you. But the more he invests in you, the more he shows up, he gives you attention, time, energy, he starts to feel protective. That's, again, it's a hormone called vasopressin. And that is generally the place in which a man commits from. Through that commitment, over time, his testosterone levels drop lower. He starts to experience more and more oxytocin. And then ultimately, he bonds with a woman the same way that she bonds with him. But it doesn't happen as quickly. Oxytocin is not as readily available in men as it is in women. This is why I say women are the gatekeepers of sex and men are the gatekeepers of commitment. And people can rebel against this. Like, you can argue with this if you want to, but you're just arguing against nature. Like, I don't need to justify that. Go do the research on your own. This actually creates a very equal power dynamic in the beginning, where generally speaking, and I know there's always someone who wants to argue for the exception, I get it. But generally speaking, when a man and a woman connect, the man wants to have sex and the woman wants commitment. And nature has programmed us this way for billions of years, okay? Like, again, if you want to argue with this, go do the research. I don't have to justify this. This is fact. Because the man wants sex typically more than the woman does. I'm not saying she doesn't have desire or it's not real for her too. I acknowledge that it is, but it's not the same thing that it is for a man. Because he generally wants sex more than she does, and she generally wants commitment more than he does, there's a very equal power dynamic here. And they are each the gatekeeper of their domain. When she manages the pace that their physical relationship unfolds under, it creates time for his devotion to develop beyond his immediate physical needs. So that's the physical part of it. Now, I think the emotional part of it is important too. And I remember, like, even after I had slept with my wife, and this is one thing that my wife did that struck me. I'd never met a woman who did this in my entire life. And it's probably one of the reasons I committed to her, because it amazed me, actually. But even after we had had sex, and I want to say, like, in my personal experience, my wife and I didn't wait an incredibly long time. It was like a few weeks or a month before we slept together. But it was enough time for me to show some real investment in a relationship. But then even once we were actively sleeping together, she didn't stop pacing the relationship. She paced the emotional development of the relationship. She was like, I don't know if I want to be your girlfriend yet. It was masterful the way she did it. And it wasn't manipulation. It was her authentically honoring herself, because what she said to me is, I've been in a lot of crash and burn situations in my life. She wasn't masterminding some manipulative tactic. She was just simply honoring her intuition. And what her intuition said is that when a relationship gets too hot and too heavy, too fast, it usually crashes and burns. And what she said to me is, I don't want to fall head over heels for someone just to have it explode. I want to know that I'm moving into something in a grounded, intentional way, and it has the potential for longevity. So my wife actually flipped the dynamic that every relationship I've ever been in the past had. She paced the physical and emotional development of the relationship, and her pace created safety for her. It also created safety for the relationship as a whole. Number 5, the law of non-collapse. So an empowered woman is not collapsing into a relationship. This is very similar to what I was just saying about my wife. She doesn't contort. She doesn't over-accommodate. She doesn't silence her needs or sacrifice her self-respect to keep a man. She expresses desire and she expresses disappointment without losing her center. And she tells the truth without drama, blame, or apology. This is maybe one of the most attractive things when I talk about what earns a man's respect. When a man sees a woman doing this, and I just want to say, like, when men enter into a relationship with a woman, it's not common for him to see a woman doing this. Like I said, when the way my wife was pacing the relationship and honoring her truth within the relationship, it was something I had never seen before with any woman I had ever been with. And it blew my mind. I also found it incredibly sexy, and I married her. It's not an accident that I married her. She called forth my devotion in the way that she carried herself in relationship with me, and she never collapsed into the relationship. And it doesn't mean that it was always clean. It doesn't mean that it was always perfect. It doesn't mean that she was even always right. I mean, there were things that she would create boundaries around and that were really difficult for me. And maybe we'd even get into fights over it sometimes. And later she might even come back and say, you know, I was a little harsh on that boundary. And over time that has softened between us. But it didn't even matter that she wasn't always right or it wasn't always perfect. What really stood out to me was that she honored her truth in that moment. And she was never critical. She was never judgmental. She just simply honored what was true in that moment without drama, without blame, without apology. This is what I need from you in this moment. She wasn't interested in keeping me. Now, she was interested in keeping the relationship if the relationship could rise to the standard that she needed. She wasn't flippant about the relationship. It wasn't like, I don't need a man, I'm good. It wasn't that kind of thing. She was very vulnerable too. You know, when I talked about the pace, she would sometimes share with me, I'm feeling a lot for you right now. And I don't want to get lost in what I'm feeling. It wasn't this, I don't need you, I'm good, I have it all together. It was very real, very authentic, very vulnerable. And yet, she maintained those boundaries. She maintained the pace. She never collapsed into the relationship. She wasn't interested in keeping me. We often had conversations that said, if we don't want this, either of us are welcome to leave. There wasn't this, I need this relationship to last. This is, I'm choosing this relationship every step of the way. And yes, I want this relationship to work out, but only if this relationship can truly hold me the way I need to be held. She never collapsed into the relationship. She never collapsed into her desire. She never collapsed into wanting to keep me. And she never dishonored herself in order to save the relationship. That blew my mind. You know, I often share about how my wife showed up with me because, like I said, I had never experienced that from any woman I'd been with in the past. Because this is something that my wife forged within herself through a lot of pain and a lot of heartache, through making a lot of mistakes. It was something that she grew into through her own challenges in life. And most of the women, if not all of the women that I had been with prior to my wife, were operating from that core wounded feminine template. Needing to please, needing to be chosen, needing to over-accommodate, needing to keep the relationship, needing to keep my approval. And I wasn't an asshole. Like, that wasn't something that I ever manipulated, or at least not consciously or intentionally. It's something I was largely unaware of. But when I met my wife, she brought a completely different energy. And I said, oh my God, like, this is the kind of woman I've been looking for. Going back to something I said earlier, I know this is a woman I can trust because she doesn't betray herself. So the law of non-collapse, her power is that she stays herself, even when emotions rise, even when it gets difficult, even when it gets confusing, even when her survival patterns would call her into over-accommodating or silencing her needs or sacrificing her self-respect, she remains true. Number 6, The law of self-referencing. I mentioned earlier that the woman is the chooser. And so I've talked about this before, where in a healthy dynamic, the man presents his offer and the woman chooses it or not. And we actually see this all over nature, right? Like all different animals have different mating rituals and like different ways of dancing or different ways of like courting. And we see this all over nature, and humans really aren't that different. Because of the way our conscious minds work, these patterns get distorted, but in their pure nature, like if you look at the male peacock, for example, like why does the male peacock have the most beautiful feathers and the females are more muted? They're not as bright or colorful. It's because the male is presenting his offer and the female is choosing it. Right. My wife and I were in Costa Rica, and we were doing these hikes through the rainforest, and we had the guide with us, and we caught these birds, and he's like, shh. And he had us like crouch down behind these bushes, and we were watching these birds, and there was this whole like mating dance that these birds were doing. And it was really like, they were just, I can't even describe it, but they were like spinning and doing all these things. Like the male bird was trying to court the female bird. He was presenting his offer in the hope of being chosen. This is the way that healthy dynamics work. The woman, the feminine, invites the connection. The masculine is magnetized, is drawn in by that invitation. He presents his offer, and then she chooses. And so this is the law of self-referencing. She's not asking, does he want me? Which is, again, the core feminine wound is this need to be chosen. And I can't tell you how many times I've had this conversation with a woman where, you know, she's going over like in her mind, how do I get him to like me? How do I get him to want me? How do I get him to reciprocate? And when we really stop and I'm like, hold on, like, let's really talk about this. And we really boil it down. She's like, you know, I don't even like him that much. I just felt rejected by him, and I got caught up in this need to earn his approval. And the flip side is that often when a man is offering that approval easily, or he's saying, hey, I like you, I want to be with you, I'm attracted to you, I want to take you out, she's not that interested because she needs to strive to be chosen. That's the pattern that her nervous system has learned, maybe all the way back to her childhood relationship with her father. Maybe from her first love when she was in middle school, right? Like, I mean, there are different origin points with different people. But this is the wounded feminine blueprint that is massively pervasive in our world, is this need to be chosen. And so when a man is not choosing her, she often gets caught up in, does he want me? Does he like me? How do I get him to want me? How do I get him to like me? But the law of self-referencing says that she's always asking, do I want this? Not, does he like me? Does he want me? Do I want this? Is what he's offering something I can truly accept for myself? And just going back to the example that I share about my wife, because she did so much of this so well. My wife was asking this question for months. I mean, we were together for probably 18 months before I really felt confident that if I asked her to marry me, she would say yes. And by the way, she's the only woman that I ever wanted to ask to marry me. It's really interesting. Every other significant relationship I've been in, after a year, I was done with it. And I've shared some of these stories in the past, but there was something about the way that my wife showed up with me, that my devotion to her only increased over time. And again, it was like 18 months or more. Like I proposed to her after we'd been together about 2 years. And it was because, like, honestly, prior to that, I didn't think she would even say yes. I really didn't. She was constantly sitting with this question, do I want what he is offering? And she didn't make the decision quickly. And it wasn't artificial. Again, I said this earlier. It wasn't her manipulating or playing power games. It was just simply her being true to herself. And I know a lot of you listening right now, you might say, well, if I'm being true to myself, the truth is I want it within the first month or the first couple of months. And I'm not going to say that's never the case, but that's the kind of thing that I would challenge you to examine within yourself. Because how much can you really know about a man within a couple of months? If you want it that much, that quickly, it's probably not a conscious choice. It's probably a wounded pattern operating. And maybe the clearest way to tell this is, how would you feel about letting it go? You know, if my wife and I had broken up 6 months in, the loss would have hurt her. She would have grieved it. Like as I said, she wasn't emotionally unavailable to me. And this is that balance of strength and softness that I'm talking about. She wasn't emotionally unavailable. She was very available. But she also had a sense of personal integrity that prevented her from going too far, too quickly. She was operating from this law of self-referencing and constantly checking in with herself. Is this what I really want? And I had to show that to her. And so what I was getting to earlier is, like, when you ask yourself, how would I feel if this relationship ended? Like, would it hurt? But I would know that it happened for the right reasons, and I would know that I did the right thing within myself, and I would know that I honored my truth. Or would it feel devastating? Would it feel like it wiped out your very existence, like you didn't matter at all? And sometimes that's the clearest way to tell if you're operating from a wounded need or if you're operating from a conscious choice. Because when you're operating from a conscious choice, it's like, yeah, I would grieve this loss if it ended, but it wouldn't wipe out my identity. It wouldn't be devastating. And I would actually move forward more clear and more confident, knowing that I consciously chose the right thing for me. So in the law of self-referencing, she leads her love life from inner alignment rather than outer validation. She's always operating from her true needs, her true desires. Never a wounded conditioning that causes her to chase the approval of someone else. Number 7, the law of balanced polarity. This is something I touched on early on in today's episode, and I'm ending with it because it really sums up everything that we've talked about here. And so, balanced polarity is the masculine, feminine energy. And so I want to talk for a moment about polarity. This is something I've addressed in many episodes. But the pervasive narrative, especially on social media, is masculine man, feminine woman. Masculine man is attracted to feminine woman is attracted to masculine man. That's not false. We see this in nature. Right? Like, I mean, if you look at magnets, a positive charge is attracted to a negative charge. If you put two of the same charge together, they repel each other. We see these laws reflected all throughout nature, all throughout the world. If you look at the atom, the actual structure of our entire physical reality, right? What is an atom? It's protons in the center of the nucleus surrounded by an electron cloud. So protons are positively charged particles. Electrons are negatively charged particles. The polarity between the positively charged particles and the negatively charged particles create an electromagnetic relationship that literally defines the structure of the atom, and the relationship between these different particles literally are the building blocks of our physical reality. If you look at the solar system, which ironically is very similar to the structure of an atom, kind of funny how that works, right? But if you look at how the Earth orbits the sun, right, there's a gravitational pull. There's a structure which is masculine. So the sun is like a masculine energy. It's the structure of the sun. And the Earth orbits the sun. It's the feminine energy that is caught in the gravitational pull of the sun, mimicking the structure of the atom, actually. And so from the macro to the micro, we see the same principle reflected over and over and over and over again in every facet of life. And relationships work the same way. The difference is because if we say, well, we need a feminine woman to orbit a masculine man, well, now we're getting into those pathetic guys on Instagram who say, you need to orbit me and I need to be the center of your universe. Well, that's insecure masculine energy. He needs your dependence, not your devotion. So the difference between the sun and the earth, or the proton and the electron, and a human, is that as human beings, we both contain both energies. And so if you say, I need a completely masculine man and a completely feminine woman, and that equals partnership, no, that equals dependence. That's a codependent relationship, because each person is fragmented into a piece of themselves rather than operating from their wholeness. And so when we say we have two whole individuals, a woman and a man who is maybe deeply rooted in his masculine energy but connected to his feminine, a woman who maybe is deeply rooted in her feminine energy but is connected to her masculine. Now we have two whole individuals who are in touch with all of themselves. The polarity isn't something they're looking for externally, like be the missing piece in my life, be the thing that orbits me and covers up all my insecurity through your dependence. No, the orbit, the synergy is already occurring within myself. And so each of these individuals has a balance of strength and softness. Each of these individuals has the ability to provide and the ability to receive. And then what happens is, because yes, we could say for most men, especially in heteronormative contexts, of course, if you look at gay relationships, you'll see that there typically is a masculine partner and a feminine partner, even though they both have the same gender. And that is exactly what I'm talking about here, how the polarity exists in everybody. And some individuals are more masculine oriented, some individuals are more feminine oriented. But in two whole individuals, they have a balance of both of these energies within themselves. And maybe, if I look at myself with my wife, like I'm deeply rooted in my masculine. My wife is deeply rooted in her feminine. And yet she steps into her masculine every day when she runs her business. She steps into her masculine every day when she's caring and providing for our daughter. And I step into my feminine every day when I'm sitting there and just emotionally connecting with my wife or my daughter, when I'm listening, when I'm being emotionally attuned, emotionally available. So yes, in the polarity of my relationship with my wife, say when we're in the bedroom or when we're being romantic with each other, I may hold the masculine space and she may surrender into the feminine space, and she may orbit me like the earth orbits the sun for a while. And that's a beautiful play that we can experience together, where I can lead and I can take charge and I can own the dynamic, and she can completely surrender and not have to hold the weight of anything. She can receive, she can be provided for. but we are not dependent on each other. We are two whole individuals who consciously choose how we engage with each other. And something I often say to my clients is that a woman will hold the masculine energy for herself anytime a man has not made her feel safe enough to hold it. And that doesn't mean that he's a toxic man. That doesn't mean that he's abusive. Like, this has happened many times over the years with me and my wife. There will be something in the relationship that she doesn't feel safe with, and she steps into her masculine. And that becomes a challenge for me. What need isn't being met right now? How do I need to show up for my wife so that she feels safe enough to surrender to me? That sharpens me as a man. If I were to demand of her that she be completely in her feminine all the time, that would never challenge me. That would not facilitate any growth on my end. That would just be me having my cake and eating it too. I would get all the benefits of the feminine presence without ever having to be masculine enough myself to earn it. And that's a dynamic that appeals to weak men. You see, I said this earlier, but I want to come back to it because it's so important. A masculine man doesn't want a woman who is feminine by default. He wants a woman who has the complete ability to hold the masculine for herself, and then she chooses to lay it down and surrender to him. Right? Like, if a woman has no ability to own her own masculine energy, she's no different than a child. She's dependent. She's helpless. And I'm not saying the feminine is weak. The feminine has many, many beautiful gifts. But if that's all she has access to, then she has fragmented her wholeness. And that creates codependent relational dynamics. The sexiest thing about my wife is that she doesn't need me, but she chooses me anyway. And that speaks to how much of a man I am. If she had no access to her masculine, that wouldn't make me feel like a man. That would just be default. She's not choosing anything. She's just dependent. And that only works for me if I have a very insecure ego that needs dependence. But the fact that she can stand on her own 2 feet and still chooses to surrender to me in our relationship together, that's the sexiest thing in the world. So healthy polarity is 2 whole humans choosing roles, not 2 wounded people playing parts. And I've noticed, I'll end with this. I've noticed 2 different types of wounds that show up in women around masculine and feminine energy. One is that she is so feminine that accessing any amount of masculine energy feels uncomfortable for her. The second is that she feels so unsafe being feminine that she can never surrender at all. The first one, the ultra feminine woman, is going to attract the ultra masculine man, and that's going to be a codependent, toxic relational dynamic. The ultra masculine woman is going to repel any man rooted in his masculine energy because he's going to feel that there is no space for him in her life. So it's not about one or the other. It's about being connected to the wholeness of your energy and being able to step into the one that fits the moment. There may be times when a woman needs to step into her masculine energy and a man needs to step into his feminine. Let's say he just had a really hard day at work, and maybe he got some difficult feedback from his boss, or maybe he had to fire somebody, or maybe he had a really hard day at work. And he comes home and he just needs to release and unload, and his wife needs to hold space for him. In that moment, she might step into that masculine role where she wraps her arms around him and she holds him and she strokes his hair. And he shares and she listens and she holds that space for him. And she provides and nurtures him and cares for him and soothes him. That might be what's needed in that moment. And then maybe an hour later, they're in the bedroom and they've reversed roles again, and now he's in the masculine and he's taken charge and she's surrendered to the feminine, right? The point is that two whole individuals have a interdependent relationship. It's not codependent, but it's also not ultra independent. It's interdependent, where we show up for each other. We hold each other's hearts. So what I want to say in closing here is that these 7 laws that I've outlined today, these are the laws that outline feminine power. These are the ways in which a woman can show up in relationship with a man that calls forth his devotion, that earns his respect, that intimidates weaker men who don't have the capacity to hold space for her, that generates a relational dynamic where she never has to compromise something that truly matters to her, where she never has to dim herself down in order to appease his fragile ego. It's the way that she invites connection without ever allowing connection to become abusive. And it's the way that she can meet a man's deepest needs without ever dishonoring her own. Now, I want to revisit this because I know I said this at the beginning. What I'm talking about here are ideal standards, and as human beings, we don't operate at the ideal. And when I shared the examples from my wife, I'm not going to sit here and say she was perfect all the time. No, she was a messy human being, just like I was, just like we all are. So the standard is not perfection. The standard is practice. Something I often share with my clients when we're talking about these kinds of things is I say, speak your truth even if you do it with a shaking voice. Right? So I'm not talking about doing this perfectly all the time. I'm talking about doing it regardless whether or not it's perfect. And the invitation I want to make, as I've said, I've recently opened up some space for my Inspired Love program for those of you who'd like to begin working with me in 2026. And I just want to invite you, if you feel called into a higher level of personal sovereignty, if I've touched on something in today's episode that you see that that's the next level for you, and the truth of what I'm saying resonates in your bones, and you say, there's a version of myself that I want to step into. I want to be more fully myself. I want to be more rooted in my wholeness. I want to be more empowered in my relationship with men. I want to call forth men who deeply admire and respect and trust me and honor me. And I want to be the kind of version of myself that commands that level of respect and honor and trust. That's the journey that we go through in the Inspired Love program. That's what over the last decade I've become very, very skilled at leading women into. And at the link in the show notes, I've put together just all the information about the program. You can see some testimonials from our graduates. You can see the outline of the program, the structure, everything that's included, just all the details. And I'd say if you're even a little bit curious, just go take a look. Click the link in the show notes or go directly to inspiredloveapproach.com and just take a look, read through the material there, see what resonates, see what is true for you. And if you want to just drop your email in and we'll send you all the details for the upcoming session, do that. And I'd love to get to know you better. I'd love to see how this program can serve you in making a real transformation in your life in 2026. You know, as we get to the end of the year, I always take some time to reflect on my intentions at the beginning of the year. And every year I make some intentions for the upcoming year. And then I sit back at the end of the year and I reflect on how did these intentions go? And I think we all do that on some level, whether we're consciously aware of it or not. And so I want you to think, when you started 2025, what were your intentions for this year? And this year went by really fast. Are there parts of those intentions that you feel like you didn't really step into? Maybe you got caught up in familiar patterns. Maybe you got distracted. Maybe you got afraid. Maybe you got caught up in a relationship that ultimately didn't serve you, but you didn't feel ready to let it go, or whatever that is, whatever happened for you. But if there's something that you wanted to step into this year and you feel like you weren't quite able to access that, I want to be really honest with you in a loving way. That's not going to magically change in 2026. The patterns that derailed you last year will derail you next year too. And I just want to invite you with my whole heart into a community where we can really help rewrite those patterns. And if you feel called, take that step. Click the link in the show notes or go to inspiredloveapproach.com. And I'd love to get to know you better and see how we can support you in the new year. Thank you for being with me today, everybody. Lots of love, lots of blessings. I'll see you back here next week. Take care. Bye. Thanks again for checking out the show. Please subscribe on whatever platform you listen to podcasts on the most. And I would love it so much if you leave a review and tell people what you think of us. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @TheLivingRelationship to connect more closely. And I'm grateful to be supporting you on your journey to love.